5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Please do not change channel.
From Krypton Radio, brought to you by Famous Faces and Funnies and Off the Chain with Yvonne Mason, it's the Hangin With Web Show Radio Hour, the Internet's premier pop culture talk radio show. You're tuned in, you're logged on, and now your hosts, G.W. Pomichter and Christian Basil. Who are you hanging with?
Hanging on and tuning in. If you haven't already, go on down for us and hit subscribe. If this is your first time, thanks for hanging with us. We are here tonight and we are hanging with Dragon Award nominee Charles E. Gannon, a 3-time Nebula Award finalist, the author of Tales of the Terran Republic. The latest title is The Raising Cain, which is the book that was nominated for the Dragon Award. Is that right, Chuck?
That is correct.
All right. In addition to being a self-styled solo scribblemeister, who wrote that? Did you guys do that back there? You did that, didn't you?
Yeah, I did that.
Yeah, you did that. Charles is also a member of Sigma, a science fiction think tank. In addition to, the list is huge. Is there anything you don't do, Chuck?
I'm not big with polka.
No polka. So
the John Candy.
The clickbait for tomorrow is that Charles E. Gannon doesn't polka. So there's.
Yeah. I'm gonna lose Minnesota and Wisconsin now. I figure, but what
Well, we'll have to make up for it somewhere on the World Wide Web. So there's a lot we could talk about, but let's jump right into Tales of the Terran Republic. Right now, this is 3 books in the series. And what inspired this story? What was the catalyst that brought this out of you?
The story, or this universe, is the
universe, really, yeah,
has really been percolating around in me in one form or another for quite a long time. Actually, some of the characters that we see in the first book and that I referred to later, when I was my freshman year at college, as a matter of fact, I had the opportunity to do an extensive project. I went down to NASA in D.C. because at 19 years of age, you're too stupid to know any better. Walked in the front door, said, "What can you folks tell me about space stations and, a sustainable space culture and future?" And some very nice secretary said, "You just wait here." And a very about 5 minutes later, a very distinguished-looking gentleman with a shock of flowing white hair and a mustache that in German, truly, it should be called. In German, the word for mustache is Schnurrbart. And let me tell you, that does it justice. I first spoke to and invited me for lunch was no other than Jesko von Puttkamer. For anybody who knows the entire sort of Wille von Braun Wunderkind, he was the youngest of them, and he just took a huge chunk of his day to explain to me the L5 project and the O'Neill Torus and all the rest. And although I presented on that factually, my last project was a novella set on L5 and political problems thereon. One of the characters in that was a fellow by the name of Nolan Corcoran. So for anybody who knows Fire with Fire from the series, that came all the way through from I was 19 to when I was much older, and we don't like to talk about that. But,
Okay, well, so we're on book 3, Raising Cain. Just nominated for the Dragon Award. Give us kind of the book blurb. What can readers expect to take away from Raising Cain?
Okay, so if people are familiar with the movies or the books, Swiss Family Robinson, which is of course a survival story in a new, sometimes inhospitable, sometimes very different land, and Ice Station Zebra, where you have a clandestine mission. A rendezvous that has a treasonous agent aboard, but you don't know who to the very end. I kind of mashed those up, threw in a little bit of Guns of Navarone style action, and also decided to ask the question about what if you run into I don't call them aliens, I call them exosapiens. What if you were to run into, though, an alien species that was disarmingly akin to you in terms of their shape and their interaction, but came from an entirely different evolutionary paradigm? How might you mistake it? And even if they're willing to be your friends, could sometimes it be the case that some friends are more dangerous than enemies? And
Wow.
that's the fastest micro version I can give you.
That's enough for my mind will be busy for a week sorting that out now, and that'll be after I read Raising Cain. So, okay, this is I would ask you how the book is going, but Dragon Award nominee, that pretty much says fans are liking it. So you're no stranger to recognition for your work. As we said at the beginning of the show, 3-time Nebula Award finalist. We also know that you were the American Library Association's 2006 Outstanding Book for your nonfiction, Rumors of War and Infernal Machines.
Yes.
Award nominee. Kind of big news this week. I've seen it all over announced on social media and things like that. What stands out about this kind of recognition to you? What really makes it something that's special to you?
This is going to sound incredibly hokey and canned, but unfortunately it's true, so people are just going to have to accept this. I kind of always see myself as the smiling face and the hand outstretched for the award, but there's an infinitude, a long line of ghosts, many past, many not simply on the stage, to which I owe this. I'm a huge amount of effort, and I like to see any success that I have as contributing to others in the same way. It would be, I'd be a jerk to say, well, I got all the good stuff, now I'm going to make it all about me. No. The more that I can, the more I get, the more I feel compelled to give.
Okay, he shut me down. How do you respond to that answer? That was it's not hokey. It's hopefully the way artists feel about their work and what their work does for other people. But more on the net. I know this is a fan-driven award too. So this is a way for you to share those accolades from your fans with the hard work that went into it. So you're going to Dragon Con this year, I take it?
You bet I am.
All right. Anything you're looking forward to the most about the con this year?
There are a bunch of fans which go to Dragon Con, which are sort of regulars. And they have been interested in this series from pretty much the get-go. And Dragon Con has been nice enough to give me sometimes an hour to just go into some of the background of the world, because the world building in this is extremely detailed. I know things about the world which would probably scare people to know that I know, because the natural question is, does this guy have a life? But the reason, so it's not my first home, but it's a really great place to go back to, and I'm hoping that I get a chance to meet a bunch of people that have been fans that I've never met before, and make a few new friends. And I actually really tend to call them readers more than fans. I like having fans, but I'm conscious of the fact that science fiction readers, really, a lot of them do tend to be extremely, and I think this is a great thing, independently minded. They are not a herd mentality group, and I'm just honored that they keep coming back and deciding to read my books and come along for a ride that I try to make feel filled with big ideas, but also it has the immediacy of a technical.
Yeah, wow. We talked a little bit about building a world earlier, and I know you've been asked 1,000 times, and we've seen some of those interviews, and our viewers are going to see some clips from those interviews here during the show tonight. But we also wanted to kind of encapsulate it for the World Wide Web, and so I tried to build a question. You have called your writing style immersive futurism. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to know, in your opinion, what is the most important element of immersing your fans and building a universe that they can feel immersed in some of these alternative futures that you create?
Well, I have to say one thing, huh? Okay. I would say that in addition to writing so that I'm never inserting myself into the narrative. In other words, I don't want anybody to feel that there's a narrator present. You know, Tolkien will do these things, and so for 2 days they walk. No, who's doing that? Who's saying that? You know, God jumping in and saying they went for 2 days. No, that's not how it works. So I'm never trying to put myself in the narrative, and I go to some pretty extraordinary lengths to do that. The other thing is I have to believe it. That's one of the reasons I do the detailed world building, because, and this gets into readers again, who are, I think readers are, they always, let's put it like this, they surprise you so often that I've ceased to be surprised by it. In that they, if you don't believe what you're saying, if you're cutting a corner, if you're taking a cheap shortcut with a character, if you don't know the science behind what you're saying and you're not certain of it, or if you're inconsistent, my gosh, like bloodhounds, they will find that under the carpet and drag it to you and say, look, you didn't do this correctly. So part of the immersivity, which I think is what good games do as well, because I work in games as well, is you have to have it so believable in all its particulars, it has to be so consistent unto itself that when the person is reading it, they, if you will, when they put the book down, it's like they're waking up back into this world. They were so much present in that world.
I like that because you're no stranger to the convention circuit. You said there's some regulars that like to meet you there and see you, some regular readers. So we have just started on this journey into conventions and conferences and making the rounds, and we have noticed that it is an amazing place to see just about anything. And so we're asking some of our creators, what's the most unusual or unique experience you've had on the convention circuit?
Probably at LibertyCon, I walked into the con. I was there less than 5 minutes. I turned around, and one of my readers, who'd been with the series from the beginning, was dressed up in costume as one of the Australian Special Forces detachment that was sort of was trying to stay under the radar in the battle for Jakarta in Indonesia in the second book. And it was, and he just stood there smiling. I didn't even realize what was going on at first, and then I was sort of, oh my God,
wow.
Something out of the pages of my book at me.
That is amazing. How cool is that, just to turn around and see your character fleshed out for you by a reader? That is so cool. So you are a literature professor, if I read that correctly. Was.
Right, haven't been in the classroom since 2007.
Okay, and I know you've been asked, I saw other interviews, you've been asked a lot about how a literature professor becomes a science fiction author, and I love your answer. You're a science fiction fan who became a literature professor.
Right, exactly.
But on the topic of literature, I really wanted to get a question that would get you talking, because before I met you, I didn't know how this would go. So, I want to know, as science fiction and fantasy become more mainstream, more pop culture, more accepted forms of reading, are we creating sort of, especially, I just read an article recently that said Oxford has introduced a literature course which is television and cinema as literature, a modern literature course. Are we approaching a place where science fiction and fantasy is becoming sort of millennial literature, where right now you and I can sit and on one hand go Jules Verne and Isaac Asimov, and we can name them as figures in literature go. Is it becoming where we are becoming literature, where science fiction and fantasy is becoming the millennial literature?
Yes and no.
Okay. And
the yes is pretty obvious. The yes is certainly in the symbols, and in since I have to put my professor hat on, I have to say for any academics listening out there that when I use the word meme, I mean it in the common sort of vernacular of the moment, rather than its original Chomskyan definition. But I think the meme, the symbol of science fiction, and I'll even go more broadly than that, alterity, that things can be different than they are, and that's a worthwhile thing to look at. It has certainly pervaded our mass media culture. I mean, just take a look at the dominance of the MCU right now, the prevalence of Harry Potter, the success of The Martian. I mean, every place from, if you will, pure fantasy, and science fiction, it is getting airtime and it is getting acceptance that it did not have before. However, that's, to me, science fiction as entertainment, and that's a meme. Mm-hmm. Science fiction as inquiry, I think, is a slightly different creature. And what I mean by that is, for instance, you have people who go around saying, where's my flying car? I've been promised that by science fiction for 50 years. Well, actually, you were promised it occasionally by the science fiction of inquiry. Who really promised it to you were the Jetsons and Star Wars and all these other things which adopt, if you will, the trappings of science fiction, and they use them to tell a wonderful, exciting tale, but the tale is usually not much about inquiry. I mean, if you look at Star Wars and you turn the lightsabers into steel and you turn the plastic armor into plate, you have gone back into essentially a sort of Arthurian mythos.
Yeah, well, if nothing else, some science fiction is not much broader than a simple hero's journey, while other science fiction, both pop culture and particularly in written word, is really about that spirit of inquiry. It's the what if. It is, and how much do we change? When you add a what if, how much of the human condition changes?
Right. I think that we can say one thing about although that sounds like it might be a little bit, I don't mean it as a denigration of science fictional memes or symbols, because the bottom line is, I think that we spend a long time, I know me growing up, I spent a long time, science fiction was a guilty pleasure. People hid it if they were writing it behind their newspaper on trains. I can't remember the name of the English author who made a running gag out of that. But I think what it says is that we're able to shift to the future, to other worlds, as a really useful place to ask questions about our own without getting bogged down in the particulars of our day and age. It is, for instance, if you try to tell a story, if for instance you're making critique, even vague, even oblique, about modern power politics in something like the Jason Bourne series, it automatically triggers all of our sense of what's going on in the news and what does that mean and what sort of policies got us into what sort of situation. Science fiction and fantasy allows you to back off, ask many of the same sorts of fundamental questions, but you get out of the weeds.
Yeah, well, it's much easier. We'll get away from the deeper stuff here for a minute, and we want the readers to get to know you a little bit. We know that your exposure to literature came from a young age. Your dad read Moby Dick to you, is that correct?
Boy, you guys have done some research. I don't think I've ever said that more than once or twice. It was an illustrated version, the highlights, I guess you could say.
The highlights. Now, you're a dad, so what did or do you read to your children?
That's a good question. It's changed. My oldest is 19. My youngest is 9. My oldest, I think the thing that they probably would remember the most are some of the Narnia books and The Hobbit. Science fiction, I find, is a little, by the time they were ready for most science fiction, they were, okay, Dad, I got this. I can read. Thank you very much. And a lot of the Star Wars sort of serializations that took place for, I guess, they're sort of early YAs. They're a lot of them. There was a long series written that extends the arc of what happens from the time that Anakin is taken in as Obi-Wan's Padawan through to, well, we know how that all works out. So they pick those up and gobble those up, and they continue reading them to this day. So, and very, very broadly, they are Catholic readers with a small c.
All right. Fantastic. Well, speaking of readers, writers or readers, what's on your nightstand right now?
What's on my nightstand are sleeping tablets to make sure I get a suck at night. What I'm doing right now, and what I'm reading right now, gosh, I'm in between things simply because, well, as the writers out there know, the more you write, the less you read. It's a sad thing, but a true thing. And I am right now just putting the final touches on Book 4, Kane's Mutiny, and I know what the next project is right after that. So I've got a little bit of a cascade that I'm keeping up with right now. But I'm trying to think. The last thing that made an impression on me was a really sort of synoptic history of China going all the way back to if you will, prehistory, because it seemed to me that that has always been a good idea, but I only got my Chinese history in bits and chunks, and I think in order to understand some of the things going on in the world today, having a more complete, even if only sort of synoptic view of it, might be cool. So I went and I did that. And that actually then doubles back into my fiction because China is a very major part in the future that I portray. So
Okay, well, they like to have a little fun with me. So the next set of 2 or 3 questions, I don't know what they are. These are just get inside your head personality thing. These are things they grabbed from Facebook and Twitter, what the World Wide Web wants to know. So I'm just going to look up, really, right off the bat. Okay, all right, what song are you singing in the shower, man? See, I don't know what these are.
I'll show you how boring I am. The song I sing in the shower, the closest thing to it, is when I reach out of the shower to get my phone, which is always there, and it has an app on it called Tape It Talk, and it runs for as long as you go, as long as you want to talk. Because for whatever damn reason, in the shower is usually, if I have a sticky plot issue, that's where it gets resolved, and I have just enough ADD that I know I'll lose it if I wait to get out of the shower.
All right. Hey, that's World Wide Web. If you want to know what Charles E. Gannon does in the shower, you got to read the next book because that's where it came from.
Wow, that's truly a loaded statement, I must say.
Okay, all right. Well, I wish I could say they got better from there, but have you ever? Okay, these are the we're showing our age now. Have you ever danced in the rain or played in puddles as an adult?
With my kids, absolutely.
With your kids, outstanding. Yeah, all dads have to raise their hand yes to that one.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you're doing your job right, you know. And danced in the rain. Sure, I did that in college.
Okay, absolutely. That counts. We'll count that. We'll count that. So, all right. So, 2 things that are on Charles Gannon's bucket list. 2 things that you haven't done yet, but you want to make sure you do.
Wow. It's an odd question because I really, that's not the way my mind works. I know bucket list, became a movie, and now it's the thing that everybody can talk about. And you've really got me stumped. Things that I would love to do, I would love to go into space.
Wow.
I don't know that I'll ever get the chance, but I would love to go into space.
Oh, wow.
And that really counts for 2 in a sense. One, get to orbit, and one get out of the and the other, I would like to live long enough to see my great-great-grandchildren, because it's not impossible, however unlikely it may be, but that means I get to stay around and write a lot of books. So I'm going to bend that question a little bit, but there I bent it.
No, nice. Very, very, very nice. Okay, the last one of the fun questions. What is Chuck Gannon's perfect pizza?
We're having to talk in past tense. I'm diabetic too for the last. Perfect pizza is a time machine. And my perfect pizza really is lots of sauce, lots of cheese, some mushrooms, and don't get in my way.
And don't get in, just stay out of the way. Clear it off. That's right.
I'm working here.
Here in the house, anything with shrimp on it goes. I get pushed out of the way, moved out of the way. There's like a tackling going on. All right. Well, Charles, I'll tell you what. Dragon Con is coming up, and your fans are looking forward to seeing you. I know your readers are. And you did make mention to the next in the series coming soon, and that is coming out 2017. Is that right?
It is February 2017, it's a lot of things change in it. I don't want to give anything away, but it's one of the things that I've been doing with the first 3 books and even this 4th book are sort of doing homages, very, very sort of, I guess you could say oblique or indirect homages to aspects that we saw in older science fiction that when we read those older science fiction books, I think we would probably consider the prose and some of the characters a little bit clunky. They show their age. They clearly don't speak to this cultural moment. So I try to essentially revisit some of the same tropes, but with that fresh lens. And this one is a little bit a book I really love, and you don't hear a lot of people who know it anymore, is Gordon R. Dixon's The Tactics of Mistake. And so that was kind of, if you will, that was my notional soundtrack playing in my hindbrain while a lot of this was being written.
Wow, fantastic. We can look for that in, you said February.
February 2017. You can find it earlier probably through eArt, which essentially is Baen releases electronic versions, also print versions, which are essentially uncorrected proofs. And there are fans out there who just grab those like nobody's business. So you might be able to find it 2 months earlier or something like that. While I'm on the issue of Tactics and Mistake, I am hearkening all the way back to the early part of our conversation where I was talking about, I guess you could say, paying it forward, and the more you get, the more you should give. One of the things that's really important in my readers, a lot of my readers, is very important to me, are veterans. And one of the things I guess I'm very, very humbly glad for is that I'm not a person who served. My family did in World War II, and then cousins in Vietnam. My oldest son is right now, he's just starting PT at ROTC right now. Not this very second, but very soon. And
could be this very second with those guys.
Yeah, anything is possible. But at any rate, the thing that a lot of veterans have said is that they're surprised that I haven't been there because it rings true to them. And what I guess I would like to say is I want to owe and give a double bow of appreciation to our men and women in uniform, both for what they do and they sacrifice, and also for the generosity with which they have shared their experiences and their stories with me. When I was 4 or 5 years old, I was listening.
On behalf of that community, thank you for doing us justice in your work, and thank you for appreciating that we appreciate you.
And the thing that I guess that when I say citizen soldier, the thing...
We appreciate it when a writer gets it right, and you should hear them at the Legion if they get it wrong. So
yeah.
So thank you very much, Charles. We have to wrap it up. We could talk all night long. Before we do, we want to send a special shout out to our friends over at Something Unique Magazine, Books, Chocolate, and Wine, the Florida Book News, Authors for Authors, the Nerdorama Network, the Famous Faces and Funnies. That list is just getting longer and longer, and we love it. And, of course, our great friends at Wordfire Press who helped us link up here with Charles Gannon. And we are so grateful for that opportunity to talk to you. We've been hanging with Charles E. Gannon, the author responsible for, among other and sundry, Tales of the Terran Republic, most recently Raising Cain, the 3-time Nebula Award finalist, and one of this year's 2016 Dragon Award nominees. Charles, thanks for hanging with us, man. We really appreciate it.
Thanks very much. And you might want to let your viewers know that voting for the Dragon is coming to an end very quickly. And whether or not it's for me or whoever, it's a really great award. Support the award. Get out. Vote your favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We got our ballot. We submitted our ballot just the other day, and there are so many great categories on there. If you're a science fiction fantasy fan, reader, viewer, watcher, or stalker, get your ballot and fill it out and vote for your favorites. The link for that will be down in the description of this video. Everybody, I'm GW Pomichter. We've been hanging with Charles E. Gannon. Remember, subscribe, log on, tune in, and see who we're hanging with next.
Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
Channeling the Mothership is an exciting journey into the higher mysteries. Certified psychic medium and clairvoyant Jerry McDaniel's readings, writings, and messages have been received by thousands of people in more than 45 countries. These messages have been obtained by channeling his higher self. How does he do it? Is it a blessing or a curse? And what lay beyond the reach of your five senses? These mysteries and so much more are examined in this explosive book, Channeling the Mothership. Explore the mysteries of the spiritual and the metaphysical. Channeling the Mothership by author Jerry McDaniel. Available on Amazon.com today.
Hello, World Wide Web. Welcome to Hangin' With. I'm GW Pomichter. Thanks for logging on and tuning in. If you haven't already, go on down and hit subscribe. We need subscribers. We want people to come back and check out the show. If this is your first time watching Hangin' With, thank you for giving us your time. We want to start out. We're going to thank our partners over at Something Unique Magazine, Book, Chocolate, and Wine, Florida Book News, and Authors for Author. These are great places on the web that are featuring our videos, so we can get our authors and our writers and these great creators out there to the world. We are here today hanging with author and writer, all-around life experiencer, Alan Dean Foster. For those that don't know, Alan is a hugely prolific author of more than 110 books, including film novelizations to several of Hollywood's biggest blockbusters, from Star Trek, Alien, Chronicles of Riddick, Transformers, Alien Nation, Terminator Salvation, and of course, what everybody is waiting for, Star Wars The Force Awakens, which is opening when this video hits the air. It'll be just a couple hours. So we've got our tickets already here, so we're ready to go and check this out. And we can't. And I understand that the book drops at the same time to ebook. Is that right?
That's right. The ebook comes out the same day as the film. The printed version doesn't come out till January 5th. That's because if they did a printed version, they'd have to print it, ship it, warehouse it, and there would be somebody with thick glasses sitting somewhere who would scan the entire thing and post all the spoilers online 2 weeks before the film comes out.
Yeah, absolutely. I can understand that. Alan's last work that just dropped on December 13th, you can check it out from Wordfire Press. It's Ocean Earth, which we just read the synopsis so far. We haven't had a chance to go and get it online, but it looks amazing. This is underwater world, and it's a fantastic story to get. So check that out from Wordfire Press, Ocean Earth. So, Alan, you've been writing a long time, and with so much work out there. What first drew you to creating and writing everything? What drew you to that?
Well, all I ever wanted to do since I was a little kid was travel. I always tell people I write to travel. I don't travel to write. And I couldn't find anybody who would pay me just to go gallivanting around the world and see things. So I had to figure out a way to support myself. And I thought, well, if I can make this writing thing work, it's something I can do anytime. And what I discovered early on was it's not money that's important for traveling. It's time. Yeah. You have to have time. And one thing that writing allows me to do is have time to travel. And in the course of traveling, there were a lot of places I didn't get to because they don't exist. Places I wanted to see that existed only in my imagination. Couldn't buy a ticket there, but I could go there in my imagination, and I could bring other people along too. So in some ways, I'm kind of an interstellar travel agent, at least as far as the science fiction goes. Oh,
we have a lot of aspiring writers out there that watch the show and that talk to us all the time. And we want to know what or who, or you have worked with so many well-known names in just great creators. And is there anybody out there or anything out there that particularly inspires you?
Well, the traveling, obviously, that's the most prevalent thing. The key is if you're doing that, if you say, well, I'd like to go to South Africa, maybe it would give me an idea for a book. The key I found out fairly early on is don't go with any preconceived notions. Okay. Don't go with the idea that I'm going to meet this kind of people or see these kinds of animals or this kind of landscape, and then I'll fill in the book around that. You have to go with a completely open mind. I went once to Tanzania with an outline for a novel. Before I left.
Yeah.
Spent a month there, and the things that I saw and the things I experienced were so different from what I expected to see and experience that when I got home, the first thing I did was throw away the outline, write a completely different book, which was called Into the Out Of. And it's the same thing if you're just walking around the streets in New York or Florida or any place else. Don't go and say, well, I'm going to Miami Beach because I want to get an idea about an Art Deco future or something like that. I'm going to look at the buildings and it's going to be this, this, and this. You have to go with a completely open mind.
Wow, that great advice, and for our writers out there, that is, open your mind and experience life. And we got that from Alan Dean Foster, who one of my kids' favorite movies around the house when they were growing up, because I'm a classic movie nut, was Anti-Mame. And you have lived, and that is fantastic. And we have some questions from our partners and our viewers and some of these authors. From Toy Thomas, is an author and a blogger from Virginia Beach. She runs the Toy Box of Words online, and she sent a question, and she wants to know, what is your secret to really good world building, whether it's building it in a fiction novel or observing something more in reality-based? What is your secret to building your universes?
Well, these are hard questions to answer in 20 words or less, but basically it's consistency, and this is the problem you find with a lot of science fiction and fantasy world building. It's not consistent.
Okay.
In other words, if you have a character who has gills and they're living in a swamp, and then in the next chapter suddenly they're downtown Pittsburgh or something, or the equivalent, fantasy or science fiction, it doesn't work because that character needs to be in that environment where he evolved. And everything in that environment needs to fit. You can't suddenly have a steam locomotive running through your swamp with no explanation. Just as a for instance. It's the same in fantasy as well as science fiction, and it's much more difficult in science fiction. Everything has to be consistent. Your characters and your animals and your plants, they all have to work together just like they do on this planet.
Yeah, it was great. We went in our teaser when we were looking at other interviews with you. You had said, if you're going to write a good alien, think like an alien, and get into that world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you have a creature, for example, like my Thranx characters, they don't have lungs that expand the way we do. So when you put them in water, they sink. So what you have is an entire species who, except for some nutcases, are terrified of going into the water.
Wow.
And so you can't put them on a boat with no explanation.
Yeah.
That's what I mean about consistency in world building and also, obviously, in thinking like an alien.
Well, that's fantastic. Toy, I hope that answers your question. Thank you, Toy Thomas, for sending that in. Author Robbie Cox from Satellite Beach, the author of Ribbons and Bows, has a question for you.
Merry Christmas, Alan and Garrett. Always a pleasure to be on Hanging With. My question for Alan would be, when you write your stories, do you write solely to entertain your readers, or do you like to put a lesson in there, something to teach in the words that you're writing?
I don't believe in books that are preachy. I would rather reach 500,000 people with one message than 500 people with a book that's nothing but messages.
Gotcha.
That's read by a bunch of academics at universities. But the trick is to make what you really want to say, whether it's about preserving the environment or what you think about certain kinds of government, is to work that into the story so that you don't hit somebody over the head with it. In other words, you don't get to chapter 4, paragraph 3, and then do 2 pages on what form of government you think you should have.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about science fiction, is that often you can teach these great lessons, like you said, they're the undercurrent of the story. They're part of this. You could almost, science fiction forever to me has always been a place where social messages and tolerance and those kinds of things have always been taught in the background. Because it's easy to want to hate an alien, and then you feel good about yourself. You're like, yes, I hate that alien. And then when you start to learn about him, you're like, oh, that alien's not so bad. And so it deals with some of the issues that face our society in a way that is entertaining.
That's right, and that's why when I can do it, when it works in the story, I like to write the story from the standpoint of the alien looking at us.
Wow, yeah.
Science fiction is a mirror. It's always been a mirror. It's really about us. It's not about the aliens. It's not about alien worlds. It's about us, and it's about this world.
That's fantastic. Now we have another question from our dear friend, Dr. Valerie Allen from Authors to Authors. Valerie helps showcase lesser-known authors, and she helps put together book events and writer, meet the writer events and showcasing other authors. And she wanted to know, by standpoint, you've done a lot of nonfiction, a lot of fiction, very eclectic work. And Valerie wants to know which type of marketing most benefits you and your communication with fans and readers, especially as the paradigm is shifted into a digital world. How do you best effectively reach out to your fans and your readers?
Well, my fans and readers seem to reach out to me with it. I have a website, which is myname.com, and there's an email address on there, and I try to answer every email that comes in personally. I don't believe in shunting things off on a secretary or anything else.
Wow.
And it's not like, I'm not Steven Spielberg getting 1,000 emails an hour or something like that. Can you read my screenplay kind of thing? But I always do respond.
All right, ladies, don't send him the manuscript. See, I told you. I told you. We had to wait.
If somebody sends something, I try to be tactful and polite, and I try to answer everything personally. And if I have a moment to give advice, I'll give people advice. I'm always happy to do that.
Wow.
So email is a great way to do it. I don't tweet because otherwise you spend half your day tweeting.
Yeah, we have recently entered the Twitter world for the show. And
right.
When I'm not tweeting, I find that I'm now following 1,000 different. It moves so fast, I can't keep up.
But that's the world we live in. It's a constant war between the people you want to talk to and the people you don't want to talk to.
There you go. Lou Belcher from Florida Book News asked us for those rare people who have not started to read the worlds of Alan Dean Foster. With so much work out there, where would you suggest that a reader begins? If they want to explore Alan Dean Foster's multi-universes, where do they start? What's your favorite book, maybe?
Current work is always a good place to start because it's the latest thing, and hopefully it's the best I can do. So I would recommend starting with Ocean Earth.
Ocean Earth, awesome. We have that on our list already, so we're good.
If there's a younger reader, there's a book coming out from Open Road Media in February.
Okay.
Which is the first intentionally young adult novel. It's a fantasy called The DVs. But for someone who wants to explore some of the older works, I'd recommend a book called Midworld. Most of these are available as ebooks if you can't find them in print.
Great.
Or my short story collections, because if someone doesn't like one story, maybe they'll like the next one.
I was browsing those on your website when we were doing our research, and there's just amazing stuff there. And Lou, thanks for your question. We have one more. We have T. Alan Diaz is the author of the Procina trilogy, and he's a writer that has reached out to us, and he has a question.
Thanks, GW. Mr. Foster, as an author of both your own original work and screenplay novelizations, do you find yourself constrained by the structure of the screenplay, or do you find it liberating to have a path laid out for you that you can expound upon? And is Luke Skywalker really Kylo Ren?
Ignore that part because I live an hour from Disney, and I don't want the Disney lawyers knocking on the door and the SWAT teams for spoilers. And in a few hours, we're going to see it. But if you want to off camera later, you can tell us all about it.
That's all right. Kylo Ren is actually establishing a chain of interstellar pizza parlors, all of which will feature pizzas cooked exclusively with lightsabers.
Exclusive? Oh, wow. Okay.
That answers the Kylo Ren problem.
There you go. Okay, so now working with screenplays. Yeah.
Right. As far as constraints, obviously you're more constrained when you're doing a novelization because it is a collaboration between you and not only the screenwriters, but everybody who's involved with the film. So in that sense, yes, of course, it's more restrictive than writing your own original work. On the other hand, the plot is there for you, the main characters are there for you, the action is there for you, and I approach every novelization as a combination of an experienced writer and the 14-year-old fan sitting in the back of the theater with his friends, loudly criticizing the bad special effects.
That was me in 1980. Your Star Wars novel, like you said, it was not an intentional young adult novel, but one of the first books I read. It just because I was so excited about the movie, and I had to know. Oh, there's more. There's backstory and there's detail, and I need to know as much as I could, and it was amazing to do that. And I honestly, I know many people may not know this, but when you guys had the book back in 1977, it was Star Wars by George Lucas. We didn't know there was another writer back there.
Well, it was in the contract.
It was okay.
Contract, and I was fine with it. It's not my story; it's George Lucas's story.
It was.
And for many years, I had to face friends and lie to their faces and say, no, I had nothing to do with the book.
Oh, wow.
And then eventually the first real book on George Lucas's work came out, Skywalking: The Life and Times of George Lucas, in which the author inadvertently let it be known that I had ghostwritten the book, and at that point it seemed kind of silly for everybody to be running around denying it, and I got a very nice official release from Lucasfilm, and George has been very gracious, as he always is, about the whole thing subsequently. Of course, it doesn't matter at this point.
Well, Star Wars is kind of a thing on its own now. It's its own massive entity, which brings us to our next question here, which is you've worked on some of these novelizations with some fantastic other creators and collaborated with other people. And as we told everybody in the beginning of the show, The Force Awakens is dropping tonight. And so did you get to visit the set and work with JJ and work with these folks when you were putting together the novelization?
No, that's very uncommon, actually. Oh, because doing a film, even a small film, is a 24/7 job. Mm-hmm. And a big film is a 25/7 job. And the fact that I occasionally have the opportunity to talk to the director or talk to the writer is actually quite rare.
Oh, wow.
The film is everything. Once in a while, I'll end up on the set. I've been on movie sets before. It's very boring. You shoot 30 or 60 seconds worth of footage, and then everybody runs around like crazy for a couple of hours to set up the next shot.
My little brother went off to Occidental College in L.A., and he is an independent filmmaker there now. And he sends me snippets when he gets a chance. That it's 17 hours worth of work for 4 seconds of film, and then it's another 20 hours of editing. So when he starts talking, my eyes gloss over, and I'm like, oh my God, that sounds so daunting.
That's right. People don't realize, if you're working on the costumes or building the sets, you finish your day's work, you go home, you turn on the TV or you get on the internet or whatever. If you're the director or the producer, you don't go home until after the film's been out for 6 months. Then maybe you can take a vacation.
Yeah. When I hear things from him and other filmmakers that we've talked to now on the show, I'm always grateful to be a writer because, when I run out of ideas, I just step back away from my keyboard. And then I get, when are you going to put out another book? And so we can eat. So the collaboration process on those novelizations is as technology's evolved and email and everything else, how do you find the distinction between working with someone like George in 1977 and working now with JJ in 2015?
Well, technology is, for better or worse, has made it much easier for people who are involved at the other end of the process to participate in it. When I did the original novelization, or Alien, or any of those earlier novelizations, it's basically, here's the screenplay, here's a few pre-production drawings, go write a book.
Wow.
Go write the book, you turn the book in, and generally they say, this is fine, and that's the end of it. That's the way it was with Star Wars, that's the way it was with Alien. Mm-hmm. With The Force Awakens, for example, there is a story group that is charged with, among other things, making sure that everything stays canon.
Okay, so because I know we're building a new canon now. I mean, from all the books that have been written before, this is really coming off that page and going and building a whole new world.
That's right. So you don't have the problem now. If you want to make sure, it's not so much that the character in a subsidiary, say, young adult Star Wars book doesn't contradict the character in the novelization of The Force Awakens. It's a question of everything you put out in The Force Awakens was now going to be canon, and you don't want anything there that might contradict something that shows up in Episode 10.
Yeah.
So that's why they're so much more careful. The difference now technologically is we can have an instantaneous or almost instantaneous exchange between myself, between people at Del Rey Random House Publishing, and between people at Lucasfilm Disney to make sure that all of this stuff lines up, not even so much for now, but for future episodes.
Yeah, that's the thing with working on such a massive franchise. There's going to be so many smaller stories. We have Rogue One coming next year. We have, of course, Episode 8 coming. So there's so much stuff to fit in there. It seems like, as T. Alan Diaz asked earlier, it seems like it could be very constraining to try to... You're living in a universe that's being created around you as you write.
It's not only the books and the films, it's everything that relates to the film.
Wow.
Whether it's pictures on a fast food franchise cup or pictures on some little kid's bedspread that mom wants to buy for Christmas, it all has to line up. It doesn't have to, but they want it to.
Yes. Now, a lot of our readers and our viewers like to... This is Hangin' With. We want to keep it social. So... we wanted to ask you. Your bio has some really interesting things on it that caught our attention, and it just made me laugh out loud. And I wanted to share that with our viewers. Your house out there in Prescott is built very uniquely. I understand it's built with the bricks from a miner's brothel. How does one acquire the bricks from a miner's brothel?
Well, in Prescott, Arizona, which was a mining town and the first territorial capital of the state of Arizona, there were a lot of such facilities, many of which were euphemistically called hotels.
Okay.
And served both purposes. And in the 1950s, there was an old one called the Rex Arms, which was on Gurley Street in downtown Prescott.
Gurley Street, okay, that's...
Not G-I-R-L, G-U-R, but take it however you will.
Amen.
It was torn down in the 50s, and everything was architecturally salvaged. And the people who built this house in the mid-50s, when there was actually nothing around us where we are now, although it's all been built up around us, bought the brick, or a lot of the brick that was usable, and so the house is built of brick that's well more than 100 years old.
Wow.
That came from the Rex Arms, and our favorite line, of course, is, if our walls could talk, they'd have plenty to say.
Amen to that, brother. I'll tell you what, there's a story waiting to happen. Now, another thing that really caught our eye, you have the, I'm going to read this correctly, the ensorcelled chair of the nefarious Dr. John Dee. Now, for our viewers out there, if you don't know, Dr. John Dee, 1527 to 1609, is a famous Elizabethan magician who studied, among other things, alchemy, divination, Hermetic philosophy, and was kind of a big figure way back when. Oh, okay, yeah. This is going to be fun. Oh, there it is. We have the chair. This is great. Oh, my
We'll
Lord.
switch chairs and I'll disappear.
Oh, wow. I'm like, I'm having a nerdgasm. This is...
There it is.
Oh, my, look at that. That is so gorgeous. You're just out garage sailing or something? How does one collect an artifact like this?
It was in an antique store in Santa Monica, California, and it was just sitting there, and my wife, Joanne, we had just been married, saw it and had saved her money and bought it for me.
Wow. Well,
and if anybody wants to hear more about it, it's in one of those short story collections. There's a story very cleverly titled The Chair.
Wow. So, guys, everybody out there, go to alandeanfoster.com. Check out the short stories. There's a tab on the side, on the left-hand side of short stories there, and you can check out the story of the ensorcelled chair of Dr. D. Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Alan.
I need the exercise.
Yeah. Now, we talked a little bit about your travels, and you are probably the most well-traveled person I've ever had the privilege of talking to. You've done things like filmed footage of a great white in South Australia.
Lots of great whites.
Lots of great whites. Well, you just kind of walking down the street to think, hey, let's go film some great whites today. You are one of the most experienced people that I can imagine talking to. How do you choose where you're going to go next and what you're going to do? I mean, things like the Peruvian jungles. That's just not on my tourist map usually. So how do you decide what you're going to do like that?
Well, I'm very comfortable in places like Rome and London and New York also.
Oh.
There's a great many things to see there too. But I'm stuck on this one planet. You remember what I said about the interstellar travel agent
Yes,
thing?
sir. Yes, sir.
And I always wanted to see as much of it as possible. What I really wanted to do was be Sir Richard Francis Burton, who was the greatest explorer of the Victorian era.
Yes, sir.
But it's the wrong era for that. We have Google Earth, and there are not a lot of places. There are not a lot of places that you can go that people generally don't go. And if I'm going to write about alien worlds and alien creatures, I should experience as much of that as is available to me on this one.
Wow.
So that's why I go to places like southeastern Peru and South Australia and wander through Africa. It's to me, if I'm looking at lions feeding or if I'm looking at tourists feeding in the Louvre, it's all one and it's all grist for the mill, and I get just as much pleasure out of one as out of the other.
Wow, that is fantastic. My like as I said before, we raised our kids on old movies, and my young son Dylan, who just got married, used to walk around when he was about this tall, and reciting from Annie Mae, "Live, live, live. Life's a banquet, and most poor suckers are starving to death." And I know one guy in the world that is not starving for living, and that is Alan Dean Foster. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Now, we want to talk a little bit about Ocean Earth. Again, part of your traveling and your experiences helped you to develop this underwater world. So, kind of where did Ocean Earth come from? I guess that's the main question. Where did that come from? Where did somebody get in their mind and go, I want to do a world that's underwater? I mean, I want to do what happens if the whole world is the Little Mermaid's domain. How do you do that?
Well, I've been an avid diver for more than 30 years, and it's the closest you can do to being on another planet, is being underwater. The environment is completely different. The animals are completely different. Everything is completely different. And I also like writing fantasy, and when you're writing fantasy, I don't want to do imitation Tolkien when I'm writing fantasy. You try to do something original. I did that with the Spellsinger series, and years went by with me diving, and I thought, how can I work this into a story? And I thought, well, I'm just going to do an epic fantasy, and the entire thing is going to be set underwater. And it involves a diver from our world who goes down in our world and comes up in a different one.
Okay. Wow.
And then proceeds from there with this civilization and these creatures entirely underwater who it's very much like our world. But a lot of the creatures who can't talk in our world can talk in that world. You can see where I'm going with this.
Yes, sir.
And, well, you can see that in the original artwork, which I'll hold up for you again.
Yes, please. It's beautiful. We want to make sure our viewers take a look at that. Ocean Earth is an epic fantasy that Alan Dean Foster has created. A world takes place entirely underwater. A lot of it derived from his own experiences as a scuba diver.
This exquisite art is by a man named Rob Caswell, by the way.
Rob Caswell has done the cover art for this. You can check that out both online at the Wordfire Press site or at Alan Dean Foster's site. Take a look at Ocean Earth, guys. It sounds like an amazing book. It's on our reading list now, and we can't wait to dive into it.
No pun intended.
Yeah, no pun intended. Yeah.
Nicely described.
That is truly immersion reading. So get in there and check it out, guys. Thank you so much, Alan, for taking your time. That about wraps us up here. Again, we want to start a special shout out and some thank yous to Something Unique Magazine, Books, Chocolate, and Wine, Authors for Authors, and the Florida Book News for sharing these videos on the web. At any rate, please take a look at our Hangin' With Show store. You can get all kinds of weird stuff. I got T-shirts and coffee mugs and ball caps, and my wife loves teddy bears, so we had teddy bears for sale with the Hangin' With. Check that out. If you're going to see Star Wars The Force Awakens tonight, make sure right after that you get home, you buy the ebook, and you have to wait maybe a half a month before you can buy the actual paperback copy. No spoilers there except for the pizza chain, which, is great. The intergalactic pizza chain. I'm GW Pomichter, hanging with Alan Dean Foster. Remember, subscribe, log on, tune in, and see who we're hanging with next.
The Hangin' With Web Show is a family show. Our daily interview series, weekly hour-long talk radio show, our affiliate shows, The Legend of the Traveling TARDIS and the Just Us Watchtower, are brought to you each week by our family. From our family to your family, we wish you a very happy holiday season. Happy holidays!